All right, guys, welcome back. Hey, we're going to continue on with the part 2 of our rhythmic phrasing, and in this particular video, we're going to talk about 16th notes. In the last one, in part 1, we just talked about quarter notes and eighth notes, and hopefully you're starting to see how you can really get a lot of mileage even just out of that simple stuff, which is amazing. But now we can kind of ramp it up a little bit and get into some 16th note phrases. And a lot of times, when we practice scales, we use either eighth notes, or we might practice 16th notes, and that's cool, but you want to syncopate it a little bit so you can start to kind of train your body to feel where all these little subdivisions are, and it can make your phrasing so much more interesting. Okay, so we're going to take a look at some 16th note phrases, and I'm just going to run through them. Of course, 16th notes is basically just dividing the beat up into 4 pieces, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. But of course, you can syncopate it by adding rests and combining eighth notes with 16th notes. That can get you into 3 notes in a beat. And then, of course, you can also do 2 notes in a beat. You can even do 1 note in a beat, of course, finding where all those different rhythmic subdivisions are. So again, I don't want to bog everybody down with a bunch of sight reading or anything like that, but this will be pretty simple, I think, to kind of digest and hopefully start to kind of inject into your practice routine and just really start to get this into your subconscious so you have all these avenues of rhythms and phrases when you're actually improvising and playing. So let's check it out. Okay, here we have rhythmic phrasing part 2. This is 16th notes, and the very first one here is just what a 16th note, like a measure of all 16th notes would look like. And, you're going to subdivide those into 4 per beat. So it'd be 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and you don't have to, when I'm playing, I'm not really thinking about these upstrokes and downstrokes, but it's a good thing to do when you're first starting getting into this stuff because it'll give you a way to organize these things. So a good way to think about it is on the downbeat, you're going to play a downstroke. On the first E, you'll play an upstroke, then a downstroke and an upstroke. Pretty simple, just alternate picking, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and Okay, so now, of course, we can start to syncopate that a little bit, and you can see here what I've done is I've changed the first note to an eighth note. So this still takes up the same amount of time, but now we've got a 3-note, what I'll call a 3-note cell. Okay, and this would sound something like this. Now, seeing how we're kind of combining the first 2 notes together, this first upstroke here is gone, right? So you got a downstroke, another downstroke, and an upstroke. And like I said, that's just so I can kind of figure out the rhythm. I want to be able to kind of internalize that. So let's say, for example, we played a C major scale with just straight 16th notes. So it would be. Now, if we did it with the next 3-note cell there, the 1 and a, it'd be. Okay, and another version of that would be to maybe add a rest, because you could shorten up this first note. It could be a 16th note with a 16th note rest. So that would sound like, with just 1 note, that would sound like. So if I played a scale, so, the syncopation is the same, but the duration of that first note is a little shorter, so it gives it a different quality, and you could certainly practice combining these if you wanted to. Okay, our goal here is just to be able to start to kind of internalize these different rhythms. Okay, the next one, here's another 3-note cell. What we're going to do now is we're going to place the 8th note on the E. So this is going to change our picking a little bit, and just the way that feels. I'm going to do it with 1 note. Okay, so now I'm doing a down, up, down, up. And I'm just kind of doing this to kind of get the rhythm kind of ingrained into my body, so then when I play the scale, I don't have to think about that too much. what that kind of sounds like. And of course, we can replace the 8th note with a 16th note and a rest, just making a little bit more staccato. That would be. And of course, you could combine those together. So this is still kind of in that 3-note cell family. Each one of these has 3 notes in it. Okay, the next one would be actually placing the 8th note on the 3rd note in. So we would have 1 E and 2 E and. So be. Okay, and of course we can shorten that up with a 16th note and a rest. All right, and I'm just going to run through these. What you can do is experiment. Now this one is another nice 3-note cell. This one's a little tricky to kind of run together because you're actually staying off the downbeat a little bit. But to be 1 E and a. Okay, I really like this one though because it gets off the downbeat. Now, these are just exercises. What we're going to do is we're going to start combining these together, right? These different rhythms together to get maybe a 2-beat phrase out of it, or even a 4-beat full measure phrase out of it. But this is kind of the first step. You just kind of want to be able to internalize these and maybe start off just playing your scales with these. Let's go back just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some of these over a backing track. And I just found like a kind of a D Dorian, which is C major, as you hopefully all know by now, just to give it some different flavor, but just so you can hear. So let's try this one first, 1 and then maybe I'll throw in some of these. Okay, so let's check it out. That's just what I would like to do is kind of put it into a musical context. So I just find a little backing track, like something in a key I'm working in or a mode I'm working in, and then try to implement some of these different rhythms. Maybe just starting off going up and down the scale, or maybe making small phrases and then combining that with some blues phrases and stuff like that. So, eventually you just want to get command of these. You want to do them enough so that you have command of these, that you can just in the moment feel what you're doing. That, a lot of people say that, like, man, I don't know how to read music. I don't know music theory. I just play by feel. Okay, that's cool. I do too. But having this gives you some sort of a backdrop as to like how to practice and how to play. You know what I mean? And really get your lines into the pocket. It's really important, I think, for your lines to fall into the pocket. So let's look at another concept here. Now, we could also reduce these down to what's called a 2-note cell. Okay, and what we're going to end up usually here is we might have some sort of a dotted 8th note. So a dotted 8th note takes up the space of 3 16th notes, then you would have 1 left over. So for example, and of course, you see I have the up and down strokes kind of put in here, and I think this is just a good way to kind of start to play these rhythms, to internalize them. So this one would start with a downstroke on the downbeat and then an upstroke on that last. So it'd be 1 and And of course, rather than making it a dotted 8th note, you could have 8th note rest or 2 16th note rest here, and that would shorten up that first note. So it'd be. And of course you could combine them. All right. And so, you know, that's why you kind of want to practice these, right? So even if you don't really sight read music, really, you know, when you're sight reading music, let's say a melody, you kind of almost need to have these like visually memorized. So a lot of times when I first started to learn how to read, I would separate my reading into kind of two spaces. One would just be reading rhythms. So I could, when I saw this on a staff, I visually kind of knew how it felt because I would practice it kind of on its own. And then you can add in the melody notes. For now, I'm just doing like one note here just to kind of figure out the rhythm and then running up a scale. So what I did here just to kind of save a little space is I have just on the 1E, right? So this is the first two beats are a 1E short and then a 1E with a dotted eighth note. So the first half it would be 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E. And then, of course, the second half of the beat here illustrates if we were to make this a dotted eighth note, just so it would sustain a little bit longer. All right, and then, of course, we can put the two eighth notes. Now, these start to get a little trickier because these are on the E's and the ands, right? So you're not playing the downbeat. And, of course, this could be short, or, you could also, of course, implore that dotted eighth note kind of thing, too. So, excuse me. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me put this against that groove. So that's a little trickier, right? Because you're right in the middle of the beat there. This one here is a and right? 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, and then the last one here is on the E's and the Us. You see how I'm kind of figuring out the rhythm with one note. So it'd be 4, 1, E, 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 kind of doing it with dub strokes. E, 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 That's an interesting one to me because it gets off the downbeats. Okay, so that's kind of, that's as far as I want to go for this particular one. What I'm going to do eventually is start getting into multi-cell rhythms. Okay, but this is a good place to start. Just think of these are one cell. So basically the same repeated cell over and over. And of course you can start copying and pasting multiple ones in 2 cells, 4 cells. Whole measures, and this really starts to expand your phrasing a lot. But just, a few things. Realizing note duration can change a feel of something. Knowing how to figure these rhythms out, maybe with just one note, and then start to apply them to the scale, and maybe just kind of going up and down the scale. And with the thought of that, you're really trying to internalize these rhythms into your body so that when you're improvising, you can start to create phrases and things off of some of these various rhythms that will make your lines a lot more interesting. I think if I have any criticism of a lot of guitar players is we get into these pattern-based things, like patterns of working on our alternate picking and stuff like that. So we can play fast, and we all love that, of course. And I do that too. I'm not bad-mouthing that. I think you got to do that, and that really helps flesh out your mechanics. But musically is where the rubber really hits the road. And it's actually more difficult than people give it credit for. They think, well, that's just easy, man. That's simple. This is the hard stuff. Well, maybe that is for a little while, but once you kind of crack that code of how to maybe do faster runs or those faster patterns and stuff, then they become less interesting. And then you kind of go, well, what else can I do here? So really you can make a lot of music without like massive chops by employing some of these strategies. Okay, so these are 16th note phrases. All right, so try just playing up and down scales, keeping it simple with these various rhythms, and also with the various note durations. 3-note cells, 2-note cells, and stuff like that. And then try to just do a little improvising with that kind of thought in the background. You know what I mean? And I like to just kind of get a mid-tempo backing track that I can just kind of play over, because it's a little more fun than just doing it to a metronome. But of course, a metronome or a drum machine is great. But this will really hopefully open up your phrasing, and we'll give you some structure as how to practice, and also how to build phrases on down the road. We'll get a little bit more into that, but let's start here, and let me know what you think. Of course, subscribe and share and all that stuff, and I'll see you next time around.